Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! It's gone! They're gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Mailbag seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and our subscribers. We're recording on Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our producer, Lickett. Well, Aaron, this is a mailbag episode, so we have a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to get to. We have one big item that we want to sort of tackle at the start, but before we do that, how are you doing?
You know, I'm doing okay. I am loving the weather. This is the time of year when I realize that I'm not a miserable human being. It's the weather's fault. So, and you know, I've been getting up earlier.
Does that to you.
Yeah, I've been getting up earlier in the mornings. I'm really getting my life together at the age of 42. So it's going great. It's going great. How are you doing?
What is not? We don't really do a lot of banter here, so I feel like I have to take this opportunity. What is early? What is getting up early for Aaron Campo?
We don't need to talk about that. No, I've been getting up at 7 during the week and 8 on the weekends.
Okay, that's not.
So,
hey, that's respectable.
It's not bad. I mean, my lifelong struggle has been if I were left to my own devices, and it's been this way since I was a toddler. I would go to bed at 3 a.m. every night and wake up at 10 or 11. And so that's just been a constant struggle. And I love working from home. It's great in so many ways. But one of the problems is that you can get yourself into this mode where you're just rolling out of bed right before your first meeting or what have you. And that's just not good for anybody. So, so I've been doing that. It's good to try to do that during the summer where, you know, when the days are longer, at least to establish it before it gets into the fall and winter. So hopefully it's a habit by then. But
as someone whose alarm is set at 6:40 to get get the day started and get the kids out of the house and everything, I have to say that I respect 7 a.m. I can totally respect, but also it is infinitely easier this time of year to get up.
It is
at 6:40 or whatever when it's like bright sunny out than at 6:40 when it's pitch black in the summer. In the winter.
Yeah, it is so much easier, and I've tried to do this before, and usually I try to do it in like October or something, you know, and it's just like maybe I stick to it for a week or two, but I've been 6 weeks or so on the schedule, so it's going pretty well. And it's funny too because like most people, when they ask me and I tell them like, 7 a.m., they're like, oh, that's pretty good, but my wife gets up at like 5:30, so
right,
it still feels like I'm sleeping in, right? But
yeah, I mean, I I definitely have fellow parents who are up much earlier than I am. I
sure.
Like my wife and I go to bed quite late, so 6:40 is a challenge. But
And there's nothing inherently virtuous about waking up early too. I think that's one of the reasons I have always resisted it. Is it's like, look, I'm being productive at 3 a.m. You know, I'm just like, that's just what my body wants to do. But the reality is the world is what it is, and I've got a desk job, so that's how she goes.
Well, that's a great transition. Actually, it's not, but let's get to this at the top of the show, such as it is. This weekend, the Sounders played a game. They lost 3-2 to Minnesota United, and that is not an irrelevant point to the story, but it is a secondary point. When the Sounders came out, let's set the stage a little bit. It was Sunday Night Soccer, so this is the big broadcast. Apple doesn't really do a great job of promoting this, but that's a total digression. We don't need to get into that. But it's like the national game. It's the only game on. The big crew is in town. Andrew Wiebe is here. Taylor Twellman, Jake Ziven. It's a whole production. And what happens? The Sounders get him out on the field wearing a shirt. Oh, what is this shirt? We look up we're in the press box and we look up at the big board and we're like, well, that's not the normal warm up. And it's a shirt that says Club World Cash Grab with a little Monopoly man running off with the FIFA money. The bag says FIFA, and he's got a little, I think, an MLS hat on or something like that. And anyway, pretty clear message. They wear it all through warmups. Then they come out from the locker room at pregame. They're still wearing it. They take photo. The whole team gets behind for the photo shoot. They're all wearing it. Then they finally take it off. The game goes on. Sounders, I don't know. I didn't think the effort was lacking, but it wasn't their best performance, certainly.
No.
Not a horrible performance necessarily, but certainly not their best. If there was a game where you could certainly accuse them if they were off by 5%, that was maybe enough to be the margin, right? And then apparently after the game, I find this out later, Adrian Hanauer, very upset by all of this, goes in there and just lays into the team kind of a profanity-laced tirade. Tirade maybe too hard. He was upset. He was very upset, and he had some choice words, implied that that he was sort of felt disrespected, reportedly, and just it was not was not happy at all with the players, and I think that he was probably maybe a little on tilt from the loss, but also, this was, I should also say, the Club World Cup folks were in town. The Club World Cup had been touring around Seattle all week, and presumably some of those officials were on hand. And so I think it was kind of an embarrassing thing to have all this happen. And he was not happy. And then the players, after sort of going through all that, came out and they had this, something I don't think I've ever seen them do this. They had all of them, 14. There was 14 players. Some of them were still getting dressed, and so whatever. But they all kind of stood together, let Christian and Steph Fry speak for them, and they basically talked about how they felt like they were getting stonewalled by the league, that they had put in a request. I should say I've skipped over the lead here. Their complaint is that MLS got a $9.5 million, or the Sounders and every other MLS team that's getting into this tournament, every MLS team is getting $9.5 million from FIFA. The players are only going to get $1 million, and they don't get any performance bonuses if they do well or if they crash out. And the players, I think, rightfully say, we deserve a little more than what we're getting. The league has essentially said, look, you guys signed a CBA back in 2021, which was notably before the Club World Cup existed, certainly far before we knew how much money was on the line. And they point to a clause in the CBA that basically addresses all other tournaments that teams are forced to play in. And it says that players get 50% or $1 million, whichever's higher. And that's it. And the players say that they've tried to sort of engage in some goodwill negotiations, and the league hasn't really been that interested in negotiating. And this is where we are now. So I don't know. Hopefully that catches us up. Aaron, what was your reaction to all of this?
I think longtime listeners of the show probably have a pretty good sense of what my reaction was. I am firmly on the side of the players here. I think that anytime the best defense you have is, hey, you signed the contract, you are pretty clearly morally
it's a good fallback. That I will say that legally speaking, that is a pretty good fallback.
Absolutely. But I mean, look, let's be realistic about what we're talking about here. This is not Meituan, right? This is these are extremely well compensated professional athletes asking for a cut of many millions of dollars. It is not the labor struggle of our times, but it is. I mean, it's not like Sounders ownership needs that money any more than the players do.
I think it's a just cause, is what you're saying.
It is.
The players
absolutely.
The players have righteousness on their side.
They do, and I think that there are many, many instances of labor negotiations, labor struggle, labor strife, where technically, legally, the employer, capital, however you want to frame it, was legally in the right. And morally not at all in an indefensible position. And I think, that's how I feel about this. I think that clearly the players are the reason the Sounders are getting this money. Maybe not this exact collection of players, which is a different conversation, obviously.
But a fair number of them.
But yeah, a fair number of them. And that's a significant amount of money for these guys. Even if they get 30% of that 10 million, which I think is basically what the sort of how the salary cap is pegged, right?
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, about that.
Yeah. And so I think that that's, a fairly reasonable ask. And I think, again, when the best defense is like, hey, you guys signed the contract, you know what? You're right. You don't have to pay a dime more to the players than that $1 million that's in the contract and they agreed to. But the players also don't have to be happy about it. And I think that's
absolutely not.
I think that's a situation that we're in here. The players have voices. They chose to use them. It's nice to see them in solidarity about it. I think that Adrian's reaction, such as it was, obviously I wasn't in the locker room. I don't know. I think it's unfortunate based on what's been reported. But I don't think it's necessarily surprising. And I've said before, I like Adrian Hanauer a lot. I think he seems like a very good man. I think he's been a great owner, certainly better than most MLS owners. I think he clearly loves the club, but he's a very rich man. And this is just typically how people in his position are going to react to their employees asking for a bigger share of the pie. And so I don't really think it's surprising. I would have liked to hear maybe that his displeasure was expressed in a different way than it was. I think that, coming into the locker room and making it about your hurt feelings is a little questionable, but it is what it is, right? I mean, I think a lot of other owners probably would have reacted in a much worse way. So, I guess we can be thankful for that. But yeah, I think it's a pretty obvious moral question, right? Do you think that the players would have agreed to this deal if they had known that there was any chance in the world that they would be getting a windfall like this potentially? And I don't think that they would.
No,
I don't think they would have agreed to that at all.
I think that, and presumably this will be a point of negotiation in the, the CBA runs out, I believe, in 2028, and so, which would conveniently the year before the next Club World Cup. So there's time to address this for the next contract, and presumably it will not be so easily overlooked next time. What do you make though of sort of, my understanding is one of the things that Adrian was upset about was that no one came to him, and I think in his this is me very much speculating, but I suppose that his thinking was like, I have a pretty good relationship with guys like Steph Fry and Christian Roldan and any number of players who have probably been here a few years. Couldn't you have just come to me and said, hey, can we work something out here, or we're really upset? And even we did ask Steph we asked the players about this, and Steph basically said, look, we went through the proper channels. We sent a letter through the MLSPA to the league, and the league basically blew us off. And so I think the idea that Adrian didn't know about it, and also we're now like, we've written multiple stories about them being upset, so he couldn't have been totally surprised that the players were upset. And I don't think that's what he was saying. I just think he's saying, before you took this action, I would have appreciated you coming. He obviously didn't say this calmly, but I would have appreciated you coming to me first, and maybe we could have worked something out, even if he didn't have the power to unilaterally make that decision. What do you make of that? Is that completely like silliness, or is that a legitimate thing for him to be annoyed about?
I think that it is totally valid way for him to feel. I can understand how that would feel like a bit of a slight, but I also think he has to be aware of the power dynamics at play. First of all,
Yes.
he is the owner of the team. He is fabulously wealthy. Professional athletes are extremely well compensated, even in MLS. The highest paid player on the Sounders, at any point in the foreseeable future, will never touch Adrian Hanauer's wealth, right? He is an extremely wealthy man. And that plays into it. And I think also it's not just about the Sounders, right? It's about, they're in a union with all of the other players on all of the other teams in MLS, all of the other players that are going to play in the Club World Cup this year, or maybe in the future, or in whatever other crazy tournaments FIFA decides to cook up in the future, where they throw a bunch of money at it to hope it sticks, so they're looking out for each other. And I think that, the collective bargaining agreement, I'm sure, establishes a way that they're supposed to address this stuff. The players are supposed to address this stuff. And I trust when Stephen Fry says, hey, we did everything we were supposed to do the way we were supposed to do it by the book. So it's not that I don't understand how Adrian might feel like that. I just think it's a little bit
insincere.
Maybe I don't want to put a value judgment on it. Yeah, unrealistic, or just maybe a little tone deaf, right? Of not recognizing the power dynamics at play, not recognizing that it's not just about the Sounders, that it's about other unions. And again, I think that a lot of the time, people who are in these, employer-employee dynamics, who feel that they take really good care of their employees, who have this sort of like, hey, we're a family mentality, forget about, at the end of the day, at the bottom line, what the actual arrangement is, and that the relationship between an employer and an employee is, to a great extent, just inherently adversarial. And even if you like your boss, sometimes you have to butt heads with them when you're trying to look out for yourself and for your fellow workers. And I think that that's just one of these situations.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I think that I can sort of understand Adrian's mindset, at least as it's been reported to me. But I also think he's not doing himself any favors by going off on the players and sort of creating this whole, like, it's an escalation. And the thing that's really frustrating about this is that there seems to be a pretty common sense solution to this. And look, if the league wants to stick by the CBA, which is, again, they're right, they want to stick. This is what was in the CBA. We negotiated this. This is the deal. Fair enough. What I genuinely don't understand why they wouldn't just say, look, we'll share the performance bonuses with you. Maybe we'll give you the performance bonuses. Hell, why not? Like, or maybe not all the performance bonus, like up to another certain amount or something. I don't know. Like some rev share in the, like, there's got to be something, because the thing is that, so as a reminder, every tie that a team gets in the group stage to get $1 million. Every win a team gets in the group stage to get $2 million. If they get out of the group stage, that's another $7.5 million. So I don't think it's at all unrealistic to think that an MLS team might get out of the group stage, essentially collect another $10 million. But the thing is that in order for them to do that, they've got to play really well. They've got to get some results.
Right.
And if you want those players to be as motivated as possible to do that, way back last year when I talked to Adrian about gearing up for the Club World Cup, one of the things he talked about was, I want to make sure that we have a team that is, as unified and together, and maybe we can, he was much more interested in creating this environment where players sort of wanted to play for each other and play for the badge and do all these kind of things than he was in spending a whole bunch of money, which, we can chew that up. But it is sort of ironic that we're sitting here when he had or the league had the ability to juice that sort of ethos, and that's found money for the league. Maybe they kind of budgeted in some level of windfall coming from the Club World Cup, but certainly they didn't budget money beyond the initial, whatever that initial payout was. So it seems like that, and hopefully we can still maybe come to that solution, because I don't think there's any reason that this should blow up the possibility of an agreement.
Right. Yeah. I think that's I think ultimately it makes an agreement more likely, even if there are some hurt feelings along the way. Right. I think that, it's gotten a lot of traction, and I would say that obviously I have a self-selected group of people that I'm hearing from, but I would say that it's 90-10 in favor of the players in terms of the reaction I've heard. So I think that's certainly a factor. But I think if you are, a core player of the Sounders, if you're a Christian Roldan or somebody of that nature, somebody who's really critical to the team and their success, and you are losing 1-0 to PSG in the 10th minute, that's, if hey, if we can grind out a point, if we can find a way to get back in this game, grind out a point, not only do we get the glory of moving on, but we get the glory of potentially getting our share of $7.5 million more dollars, right?
I don't think it's crazy to think that players might be motivated somewhat by money. I think that's a pretty fair...
I think that's totally reasonable. Yeah. And I think especially if it's okay, do we just kind of write this one off and heal up and get back to the regular season, which is a bigger deal because nobody is expecting the Sounders to beat PSG. Nobody's expecting the Sounders to get out of the group. But they are expecting them to make a deep run into the playoffs. They are expecting them to be competing, for a top spot in the Western Conference. And the longer they stay in the Club World Cup, the tougher that stuff becomes, right? And they do have guaranteed bonuses if they finish a certain level in the table and they go a certain, number of rounds in the playoffs. And maybe they're not thinking about that in the moment, but they know it, inherently. Right. And I'm not questioning anybody's effort or commitment to the team, but I just think it's totally reasonable to be if they've got actual skin in the game, they're probably going to be a little more invested. And I think that that's pretty fair.
And I think that's exactly why FIFA created the structure the way that they did. Half the pool of money is performance based.
Right.
I think that tells you how FIFA felt that they needed to motivate players and motivate teams. And, I don't know exactly how other teams are doing this. There's been some, supposedly Real Madrid told their players they each get $1 million if they won the whole thing. That is not a huge percentage. That's like a 25% of their total rake if they were to do that. So, still 25% is a lot more than 10.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what the Sounders are getting. But anyway, I think anything else on this subject that you wanted to get out? I feel like we've explored it pretty thoroughly at this point.
No, I think we've hit all the big spots. I do hope that the players are successful and clawed back a little bit of this money, because they're the ones that earned it for the most part.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I hope that cooler heads can ultimately prevail. And frankly, this is not that weird for contract negotiations to have. I realize this is not necessarily a contract negotiation, but this is how negotiations often go: is that one side gets very frustrated, or both sides sometimes get very frustrated and say things that they maybe they'd rather not have said, but then ultimately they're able to figure it out. So I'm not writing this off. Maybe that's being Pollyanna-ish, but hopefully something gets done here. All right. So we have a whole bunch of questions. The first one though, Aaron, it seems to be I'm a familiar person. You want to go ahead and ask that one?
Yeah. The first one is from Aaron. How pissed off should Sounders fans and/or Washington taxpayers be about the Lumen World Cup upgrades? What a great question!
What really great, astute question.
Yeah.
So
I bet that guy's really handsome.
Probably.
Yeah, he probably gets up really early too in the morning.
So there's been a bunch of stories recently in Axios, in the Seattle Times, in the Puget Sound Business Journal, and all of them sort of broadly talk about these upgrades that are coming to Lumen Field. And essentially the upgrades come in a few key areas right now. The biggest one, or I don't want to go in the order. They're going to be adding backs to the seats in the Hawk's Nest because that is apparently a requirement for FIFA. They're going to be adding turnstiles to the entry gates, which is very annoying, but apparently another thing that FIFA demands. They're going to be expanding some seating areas, apparently. Again, FIFA has demanded this. They have to change the signage because it can't be Lumen Field. It has to be Seattle Stadium or something like that. So there's this kind of laundry list of things that they're going to have to do. But the biggest expense, the single expense, appears to be that they are going to be ripping out the turf, which we knew that. But then they're going to have to, they are going to, I don't have the full list here, but essentially they're going to put in a brand new grass pitch, a hybrid. Actually, we learned this. Another thing we just learned, it's actually going to be a hybrid turf. And then they're going to put like these vacuum systems so that they can suck out the water, even though it probably won't rain, but who cares? And then there's a whole like drainage system. They're going to have to get grow lights. They're going to have to get maintenance equipment, and they're going to basically put that in right after the Seahawks season ends sometime in January. And then my understanding is that it's going to just basically be like treated and babied and everything else. And that maybe the first competition that's really played on it might be the World Cup. I'm pretty sure no one else is going to be allowed to play on it. So that does have ramifications that I aren't really going to be able to get into today, but it sure looks like the Sounders are going to be nomads at the start of the season. Anyway, so there's a quote in the Seattle Times story that just drove me absolutely bonkers. And it is from this woman named April Putney, who is the chief strategy officer for the local organizing committee. And she says, everything the state is funding. And by the way, the state is kicking in like $20 million to fund all this. That's the premise of your question, I suppose. We should have added that. She says, everything the state is funding in capital for the stadium are all things that meet FIFA requirements. Okay, fair enough. But also serve a broader purpose for the stadium ongoing. Oh, okay. None of it is just something that is beneficial for the tournament itself. It's all things that will provide ongoing benefit and help the stadium either with attracting future events or solving the ongoing needs that they have. By the way, they in the same story, they say they're ripping out the grass as soon as the tournament's over. They're going to be putting in the field turf. Those things do not seem to compute to me. I am sort of losing my mind. It feels a little bit like I've been trying to get someone at First and Goal to answer some questions about this. So I don't want to get too out over my skis, but as it looks right now, it looks like the taxpayers are just paying for a short term. I mean, I don't really see how this is a long term. Like, what is the long term upside here? They're putting in some ventilation.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The state of Washington is in somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 to $15 billion budget shortfall. They're having to cut a ton of services all of the time when there are pretty serious alarm bells about the economy generally. It's unconscionable. What programs that benefit vulnerable people, that benefit children, that protect public lands, what could that money be doing, right? The Allen Trust is worth, I think, about double that state budget surplus, and they are, as far as I'm aware, not pitching in a red cent, right, for these upgrades. And ostensibly, that's because the state of Washington owns and operates the stadium. The state of Washington isn't seeing any benefit from that. The Seahawks own the stadium for all intents and purposes. They manage the stadium. They get all the revenue from the stadium. It makes me so angry. It is so insulting to, if you as pissed off as I am about this, imagine if you don't care about sports at all, how much this would have to piss you off, it's unconscionable, and it is such a slap in the face to also throw on top of it, oh yeah, and the biggest chunk of that money is going to be totally wasted. It's going to be, and it's stuff that we've been told for years. We have been told for years, we'd love to have grass too, but we just can't make it work. We just can't do it. Just too expensive.
It's impossible.
And you're getting this money to do it, to put in all of the infrastructure that you would need. And yes, it would cost more money than the turf, but it's there. It's the capital investment is there and paid for, and you're just going to throw it away.
Yeah.
It is shocking to me. And not to mention, like you've already laid out, like all of these requests that FIFA is asking for are absurd. They're at security theater at best. It's preposterous. It's such a joke. And
there's a whole separate thing for security upgrades that is separate from this $20 million, because it's like $300 million or something. I don't know if that's not just for Seattle, but there's like a huge, I think, congressional line item, basically like national level, like maybe it might be like $600 million that Congress was being asked to kick in to help upgrade security at the various venues, which I'm sure will all be used in the most
well, and a lot of that money
way.
in that line item is going for enhanced border security, which I'm sure will only be used for the duration of the World Cup and will be administered justly.
Right.
It's better not to think about it, man. I can't be walking around this pissed off all the time. It's not good for me. But it's people should be. I think the question was, how pissed off should people be, and I think they should
pretty
be
pissed off. I think is the answer. Yeah. And I will say, my hope is that there's going to be more reporting. Like, so far, I've been a little frustrated at the state of the reporting on this, because there's so few follow-up questions seemingly being asked. Like, every story I read on this, and I'm coming away thinking, like, God, I would really like to know the answer to these questions. Maybe there are perfectly logical explanations. I kind of doubt it, but like, the way that
maybe somebody should ask.
Right, that maybe someone should ask, and I guess maybe it's because this stuff only affects the soccer fans or something. I don't know, but it feels it is very much underlining the reason that Lumen Field is feeling increasingly more hostile towards the Sounders, and I'd like to think that the Sounders are really doing their best to push back against that. I don't know what the Sounders are doing really to push back against it, which is also frustrating. But we do have some soccer to talk about. So
we do.
Why don't I kick us off here? This is from Andrew, and I'll remind everyone, we field these questions from our Discord. If you want to get involved in the Discord, you got to become a Sounder at Heart member at the supporter level or above. That's $75. But then you'll get into our Discord. It's a great community, and you'll be able to ask us questions. But more importantly, you'll be able to interact with just really great people most of the time. This is from Andrew. He says, do you think Obed is still going to be sold either this summer or next winter? And how much of a problem do you think it is for the Sounders if he is not sold?
I do think he's going to be sold. I was pretty dead set on him being gone this summer, no matter what. I am now kind of the opinion that if he plays well at the Club World Cup, there's a good chance he goes this summer, but otherwise I think it might be in the winter after he gets some more time with the Mexican national team. I don't know. For whatever it's worth, in like 3 straight career modes I've done in FC25, he ends up playing for Auxerre, which is kind of funny. So maybe, maybe they'll have Auxerre, I think that's how you say it, in Ligue 1. Yeah. So maybe, maybe that's where it'll end up. But at any rate, yeah, I think there's a chance he goes this summer. I'm a lot less convinced than I was earlier, and it's not because he hasn't been good. I think he's been quite good this year. It's just I just haven't heard the buzz really, and you would kind of expect to hear some of the buzz if something was imminent.
Yeah, I am with. I think you have accurately identified. Like there are no, like, just last week we talked to Craig Weibel and he said there are no offers for him right now. That might partly because the Sounders have made it very clear what they're looking for, which seems to be, a sizable fee. And he's also made it clear he wants to play in Europe, so that, you're sort of narrowing who might be interested in transferring for him, paying a transfer fee for him. But yeah, and I as far as would it be a problem if he's still here? I mean, I guess it depends on the circumstances. If the Sounders are as far as I can tell, are being open and honest with Obed about the, what's going on here, and he seems to be on board with it so far. I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Sounders end up signing him to a U22 contract. And then if they do that, he would presumably be well compensated. He can still, he's still only 19, so he's got plenty of time to move still. It's not like he's an old man. So I think the Sounders are okay being patient. I think he's okay being patient. And so I don't think it's a problem. I think the bigger issue will be trying to replace him more than like how they handle him if he sticks around.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network.
Well, this is somewhat related to that. From Ken W. If the Sounders don't receive the kind of offer that makes sense to sell Obed, does Danny Leva's best path become seeking another club if he ever wants to become a regular MLS starter?
Yeah, it's hard right now to see Danny Leva's path to more regular playing time with the Sounders. Like he's gotten okay playing time, but he is nowhere. He does not seem to be close to breaking in as a starter. And that's a problem. I would say last year I was an advocate for seeing him be more of a backup for Albert Rusnak. And that doesn't, they seem to have now sort of a plethora of players that they could potentially use to spell Rusnak if he wasn't available. So that cuts off a path. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Danny Leyva also might not be an MLS starter, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I like him. I think he's a good player, but I would agree that it does not look like he has a very clear path to starting for the Sounders, and that's even if Obed gets sold, I suppose.
Yeah.
This is from Jawami probably. Who internally do you think will end up using the U22 initiative slots for? Seems like this is a really good mechanism for locking up young talents like Obed and Reed Baker-Whiting on expiring first deals who have a strong ability of moving outside of MLS after expiration. Do you think Obed and RBW are looking to move outside of MLS and have rejected U22 slots because they think they can do better in non-MLS free agency, or are the Sounders just being stingy?
I don't think they're being stingy, really. I think they have 2 spots. I think it maybe doesn't make a ton of sense to use one of those spots on Obed if you think he's moving immediately. But I think every day that passes without really hearing any buzz that he's on his way out, the more it makes sense to use one of those spots on him. I think, too, it gets complicated because Reed Baker-Whiting seemed like the obvious choice, coming into the season, right? But
right.
I don't think he's the fullback that looks most likely to take one of those spots right now.
No, I think he could end up being a U22 signing. He does have a contract that's running out at the end of this year, so that puts some impetus, I believe, on getting that done. But he also hasn't done anything to really demand that the Sounders give him one now either. Like he's only he hasn't. I don't think he's started a game yet this year. He's been struggling to stay healthy. Like he struggled with to get healthy at the start of the year. He's sort of had this persistent muscle issues. I like talent evaluators really like him. He's got a great build. He's got a great, he's got some really good skills. But he needs to get on the field more, really. So I don't think the Sounders are fielding a ton of offers for him right now. So, it's kind of a weird one.
Yeah. Yep. Next one is from Nevtelen. I know Garth isn't exactly Atlanta's GM, but thinking about the Sounders roster build and Atlanta's roster build right now and how they've spent money over the last couple of windows, if Arthur Blank called Adrian tomorrow and offered to give us Garth back in exchange for Craig, would Adrian do it? Should Adrian do it? Sorry.
I don't think Adrian would do it, in part because I think I don't think Adrian, I don't think that situation ended on bad terms, but I don't necessarily think it ended on great terms either. So I think Adrian was probably, not like he was, I don't think he was trying to push Garth out or anything, but I think he is probably happier with Craig than he would be with Garth right now. That's a good question. This is like full speculation. I had not even thought about it in this context, but I would say no, he probably wouldn't. That's my answer.
Yeah, I don't think he would, and I don't really think he should either. Not because I don't think Garth is, he had a ton of success here, obviously, but there is sort of a you can't go home again kind of thing at play. But also, I mean, I think that maybe some of Garth's weaknesses have been exposed in Atlanta. And I think that sometimes when you can be fantastic, great at your job, considered a genius, and then you run into some difficulties at your next job, but your next way up the ladder, and you're not the same person you were, right? You lose some of your confidence, lose some of your edge, whatever it may be, and so there's a risk of that. But I also think all the stuff you just said about maybe it wasn't the greatest working relationship towards the end of things. I think is certainly a factor. And I think Craig's doing a really good job working within the parameters that he has.
Yeah.
And those parameters are what they are. Maybe there was a time when Garth could get more out of Adrian than maybe Craig is able to. But I think if Garth were to come back now and try to push for that, Adrian can say, yeah, you did a really good job with that in Atlanta, didn't you? So, and he'd be right to say so, right? Like it's tough to argue with the results they've had down there. So, yeah, I'm with you. I don't think you would or should.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting question though. All right. This one's from good friend of the show, Bill Jones, TRPT. Watching the Dallas Sounders match made me wonder how the league does or doesn't make accommodation for colorblind players. I don't know what it's like to be colorblind, but I know 8% of men are, and red-green are said to be one of the tougher pairings to distinguish. Does the league take this into account somehow? How do colorblind players cope?
So I'm going to just take a wild stab at this and say that the league does not take this into account. I used to do some consulting at a large software and hardware, but mostly software company over in Redmond. And one of their directives for the kind of work I was doing was making stuff accessible and colorblind safe. And I would say 9 times out of 10, when I presented something to a client, they said, I want red and green. I want stoplights. And I would say, it is part of my contract that I cannot do that. And they said, I don't care. I want red and green. And I explained why. And I explained the policy. And they said, I don't care. And so I think that most likely the league does not care about that or take it into account. I would assume that the players have other cues. The maybe shorts color. They do train with the guys.
Yeah,
but it can't
I was
going to
say, I think I think this is part of why the league has gone to a dark light thing.
Yeah.
And I will say in this case, so Dallas actually wore blue, a dark, like the front of their jerseys were actually dark blue. So
yeah,
I don't necessarily think that these particular jerseys are that hard to distinguish. The Sounders have stripes. Dallas doesn't, right. So it's like I suspect that a colorblind player has probably learned the nuances of this stuff.
For sure. Yeah. I saw a clip of like a College World Series game the other day, and it was, I think, Oklahoma State and somebody wearing red. And it was both teams were wearing gray pants, and it was like orange and red jerseys. And I was just like, how does this happen in 2025? Right. It's pretty crazy. So compared to something like that, I do think that, in MLS, it's a little easier to differentiate. Next one is from Pulsbo Sounder. When MLS Season Pass was launched, I was under the impression that there would be additional content beyond the games and match previews, recaps, and that a lot of this was going to come from the clubs. Are the Sounders working on expanding the amount of content that is on MLS Season Pass? Having things like post-game press conferences and notifications in the app when there is new content posted would drive more engagement.
Yeah, I can't speak to what the Sounders are doing. I do know that they do at least a sort of like weekly feature that they put together and I've watched it a few times. It's well put together. It's not super interesting necessarily, especially if you've been paying attention to the team, but they do put out some content. I don't understand why they aren't doing things like showing the press conferences live. It seems like that would be something that would be relatively easy to do. There's a lot of missed opportunities, frankly, on MLS. There's the fact that they don't program it 7 days a week is bizarre to me. Like they should have live original content every single day. Like Golasso Network, which is essentially a part of the Paramount ecosystem, and it's their soccer channel, and they have a 24-hour a day show that is on like Pluto and streaming, and you can, in the morning they have all kinds of original content. Into the afternoon they have original content, and then they show like replays and other kind of things like that. I don't know why MLS is not taking advantage of the platform that they have more thoroughly. It's wild. We were talking earlier in the show about how they had the Sunday night soccer thing. I don't think they promote that almost at all. I don't know that people know that the pregame starts at 2:00 for a 3:00 game, for instance. And they have some good content on there too.
I only know because when I turn the games on 2 minutes before, it asks me if I want to go live or watch from the beginning, and I always say go live, and it always starts at the beginning. So, but yeah, without that, I probably wouldn't know that there was an hour of pregame. I feel like this has kind of been a trend with MLS, unfortunately, over the years that I've been following the league, in that they have this big new initiative and they get people all riled up about it and they promise exciting things and they just don't follow through. And this is maybe the most egregious case of that. I think I think there was a lot of promise with the Apple deal. I was a very staunch defender of it. Well, I think acknowledging the potential downsides, I thought that the upsides were worth it, and I just don't think the league and Apple have done a great job of trying to fulfill the promise. And it's a pretty big bummer because I think they could have been pioneers, and they could have been sort of showing a better way forward, or a new way forward at least. And I think instead what has happened is all of the stuff that everyone kind of knew would happen has happened, and none of the promise has been fulfilled. And so it's just kind of fizzled out. It's been pretty unfortunate to watch.
Yeah, I would totally agree with all that. There's so many things that they could be doing that would be, I think, relatively low cost and maybe even low effort, that seem to me that they would make the product just so much better, and it's just not happening. All right, this is from South Sounder. They said, often see our MLS opponents rostering players who are, quote, on loan from European clubs and other parts of the world. Isn't this roster vehicle also available to the Sounders? And if so, why have we not been using it to inject more talent into the squad? What's the downside, if any, of participating in lending players?
So it is definitely available to the Sounders. They've used it many times in the past. I'm gonna forget somebody, but to my mind, the most prominent example of this was Freddie Montero. He was originally on loan before the Sounders bought him from Millonarios, right?
Yeah.
Was it Millie who was that?
No, he was from Cali.
Oh, that's right. And then he went to
Millonarios later. Yeah. João Paulo was also a player they originally brought on loan.
Yep.
Brad Smith,
Mario Martinez for the
Mario
the
Martinez. It didn't work out quite as well, but
no. Yeah. Thomas Jaguaribe.
Yeah. We could go to we could go down the list of the less successful ones, and that also illustrates the Sounders have not used this mechanism very often recently. Georgie Manungu might be the most recent player. They actually, I take it back, they have Kato Yamada currently on loan. He's a Japanese center back. He's at Defiance. They seem to be using it a little bit more on Defiance lately, but I guess the argument is loans are sometimes a tough needle to thread because you need someone, you need the right circumstance. And I don't think the Sounders have remotely like said we're not doing loans. I just think that they haven't done as many first team prominent loans as they used to. But I don't know. You look around the league. How many really successful loans are there right now in the league?
I will admit that I'm not as plugged in to all of that stuff as I used to be, but I can't think of any right now that are necessarily setting the world on fire. I mean, I think when you look at the criteria for a player, or not the criteria, but the common reasons a player is going to go on loan, probably the most common is they're a young player that needs playing time at a high level, but not as high as their parent club.
Right.
And they need that playing time to be guaranteed. And that's probably just not generally going to happen in MLS. It's a better league, I think, than players are typically getting loaned to. Like in England, for example, Premier League clubs are loaning players down to League One, League Two, that sort of thing. And MLS is a better league than those. The other reason is it's a player who doesn't want to be there, and they make too much money or haven't been very good, and so nobody wants to buy them.
Right.
That's probably that's usually going to be a problem in MLS because it's going to be a DP, and you're not going to want to pay a DP salary for a player who hasn't been producing generally. So those are the two most common reasons. And it can, like you said, just make it sort of tough to thread the needle. And I think that the teams that are loaning guys in are teams that don't have great academies. I would take a guess. I don't have the numbers or the data to back that up, but that just seems sort of based on observation. That seems to be the case, right? Because the Sounders have lots of young players that they can use to provide depth and eat up minutes. Other teams are loaning those players in with an option to buy sometimes, and the Sounders just don't really need to go that route. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. It's just I think that's a good place, good way of saying it.
Next one is from Tired Yeti. What's been affecting Ryan Kent? He came on so strong initially, but seems to be really struggling as of late. The talent is totally there. Any thoughts on why he's in a funk?
I mean, I think he is a player who is still getting fit. I think he's a player who's still learning his teammates. I think he probably caught some opponents by surprise a little bit. Yeah. And so I think this is probably, to me, it still seems like within the normal range of growing. I will point out that he is pretty close to having a couple more assists. And, he had an assist to Georgie Manungu on a ball that was called offside a couple games ago. And then he's had a few recently where he has just slightly missed guys at like the back post. So I think some of it is sharpness. I think some of it is teams have kind of figured him out a little bit. He's been getting double and triple teamed a lot. So one thing we've not seen him do is beat guys off the dribble as much. And I think a lot of that is because he's just getting, teams are defending him better. But I do feel good about his trajectory. But, I think it does sort of underscore that we probably got a little, folks got a little ahead of themselves when they're like, give the guy a DP contract now after two really good games.
Yeah. I think too, players like Ryan Kent that have his skill set are going to just be inherently streaky. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. And I think that we were getting questions a while ago about how could all these teams be so crazy to let this guy go?
Right.
And I think if you're playing at the level he was playing at and you can't do it as consistently as other players, you're probably going to be the guy that ends up odd man out.
Right. Yep. All right. This one is from Andrew. Does Adrian have enough money to be the primary owner of an MLS team in 2025? Woo.
Yeah. So I don't think that the sheer amount of money is necessarily the issue, because the thing to keep in mind is that Adrian is the majority owner. He is the face of the franchise. He's making most of the decisions, I think, both in the shorter and longer term, but he is not the entirety of the ownership group. He is some percentage of it that we don't actually know. I don't think. But the ownership group as a whole has plenty of money to be owning an MLS team. They have agreed to do capital calls if need be. They have agreed to spend money when the time comes. I think the question is, because I don't know how I feel, so saying the issue isn't really the right way. I think about this a lot, and I don't know, does Adrian have the mentality to be the primary owner of an MLS team in 2025? Right. And I think that's a fair question. And I think a lot of the decisions that are going to be coming down the pike in the next couple of years are really going to give us a sense of that. I think if the Sounders end up building a stadium at Long Acres, the answer is an emphatic no. Adrian does not have the temperament to be an owner in MLS in 2025 or 2027, I guess is the case may be. I think that is a disastrous decision. That is extremely short-sighted and myopic. And so I think that's a big tell. But I think right now there's no reason that Adrian can't be a super effective and successful owner. but it is getting to a rubber meets the road kind of place where we still haven't signed a U22. We still have all this money ostensibly to spend on transfers that we're not spending. You know, the situation at Lumen is most likely untenable. And so you've got to make decisions about what kind of owner you want to be in this new landscape. And I think if you don't have the temperament to make those decisions, it's probably time to find somebody else to take over the stewardship.
Yeah, I think you put it well. I'm pretty sure he has the money. If he wants to write some checks, he can. Presumably, he's well resourced enough that he can handle, taking a few million in losses if that's what it demands. But I think you're right that it's like, is he willing to do that? I don't know, and I think you're right. Time will tell. The Sounders do, they've been very competitive. Let's put that right out in front. But we can all see areas where a little bit more money would be useful. Right now they're looking at a U22. I would think that if they're not willing to spend $3 to $5 million on a U22, I don't quite see the point, because I don't know that you can get a player who's going to cost less than that that's going to actually be an upgrade over the players that they have. So if you're not willing to spend that money, then what are we doing here? Right. And so I think these are things that we're going to find out. But at the same time, if they're competitive, I guess he's got enough money, right? Because they're staying competitive. But I mean, these next few years are going to be very interesting to see what the Sounders want to be.
Yeah. Two more. Next one is from Nate and AD. In hindsight, was splitting from the Seahawks in 2014 a mistake? I think it might change the team's relationship with first and goal.
I have thought about this a fair amount, and I think it was still probably the right decision, especially when you think of where we were in 2014. I don't think you had NFL teams that were, you did not have any examples of NFL teams that were treating their MLS team like as co-equal partners in the relationship. And I think the Sounders needed to go out on their own. It may have hurt their relationship with first and goal, but in a lot of ways, like, I don't know, in big ways, I don't know if the Sounders, the Sounders don't have a great relationship with first and goal, but was their relationship, how good was their relationship before, right? Like they still didn't have access to a lot of the revenue streams that they want now. Maybe concessions were a little bit better, but other than that, I don't know that the state of the organization was really better off in the when they were partners with the Seahawks.
I do think that a lot of the little things were handled much better. Like,
yes, I would agree with that.
For example, season ticket packages were much nicer and slicker. Like all of that kind of stuff, I feel like was better. I do think the game day experience was better as well. But I wonder how much. How much?
I mean, I feel like that was still pretty good through like 2018, 2019, though.
I agree. And I also wonder how much of that would have stayed true in a post Paul Allen world, because Paul Allen was by all accounts not super invested in the Sounders from an emotional perspective, but was very keenly aware of how important they were as an investment vehicle and wanted them to be successful. And I don't get the sense that is true of the folks managing his estate. So, I also have always kind of been under the impression that it was not something that could last forever, right?
I think it had an expiration date too.
Yeah. And so maybe it would have been better if they had been able to stick it out. I don't know. I think you make a pretty good case that it probably wouldn't have been, but I think it had to at some point. So, but it is, I mean, it is.
It's an interesting counterfactual.
It is. It's interesting to think back to what that experience was like in 2013, 2014, and how it differs in the ways in which it was better. But I think a lot of the time when you do that, you forget the ways in which it was worse as well. And there were some of those for sure.
Yeah. All right. We're going to end on D Tolls. And he says, what are your expected score lines for each of the Sounders Club World Cup matches? And what's your expected likelihood the Sounders get any sort of result across the 3 matches?
So I am in the minority. I do not think a lot of people are acting like there is no chance they get any points from any of these games. And I think I'm not going to say that they're favorites to beat Botafogo. I do not think Botafogo is in anywhere near the same class as PSG or Atletico.
No, no.
It's not. It's not even close. And the Sounders have beaten. I'm not sure that I think Botafogo is better than some of the Liga McKees teams that the Sounders have beaten at home. I don't know. I think that is a winnable game, and I think it's probably reasonable to expect a point out of that game, or to think that that's a reasonable target. I don't think they're going to get out of the group. I think that's pretty, that's not going out on a limb to say that. But I'll say 2-1 against Botafogo, and they win that one.
Ooh, saucy.
Yeah, why not? If they lose, so what? Who cares?
Yeah,
right?
No, I like it.
I'll say I'm going to say 1-0 against Atletico Madrid. I don't know.
A loss or a win?
A loss. They're going to lose that game.
Okay.
They're not going to score. They're not going to score in that game.
Okay. Fair enough.
And I will say 4-2 against PSG. PSG is going to score a grip of goals, and they could score 7. But PSG does not know how to take the foot off the gas. It's just not. It is in their DNA, and so I think that the Sounders could. And also PSG is not putting out the team they put against Center.
No, I think that's a key.
In the pitch.
Yeah, this is a couple things work in the Sounders' favor in the PSG game. One is there's just starting from scratch. PSG is probably not going to be playing their first team maybe in any of these group stage games. No. These guys just came out of a pretty long season. I got to imagine if they can give them an extra week off, they're going to get an extra week off.
Yeah.
There's also a possibility that they've already clinched advancement in that game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's possible the Sounders are facing like their third team, really.
Right.
And so PSG's third team still very, very good, but
sure,
probably not 7-0 good.
Yeah. The other thing too is PSG is, I think, one of the best teams in the world. I don't think there's any. I think whoever has last won the UEFA Champions League is one of the best teams in the world. I don't think there's any real question about that.
Yeah, I don't think that's very controversial.
But they also lost to mediocre Ligue 1 teams this year, and in big games, right? Like they didn't lose their first league game until April 25th, and they lost 3-1 to Nice at home. And Nice, I think, finished. Well, they were 4th in Ligue 1, so not a bad team, but certainly a team PSG would expect to beat at home. They lost to Strasbourg. Strasbourg finished 7th. So, mid-table Ligue 1 teams, the kind of teams that PSG would expect to beat, right? And these are big games. They also beat Inter Milan 5-0. They won one of their Champions League knockouts by a 10-0 aggregate. So, it could
things could get ugly.
They could, but I don't know, man. I think also PSG is what they are. PSG is they're a PR project for a petro state with functionally unlimited money. You can't compete with that. Like you just can't. And anybody who is a fan of the Sounders because they want to see the best soccer in the world is barking up the wrong tree. right? MLS is a good league that I love deeply and watch more than any other league, but it's MLS, it's not in the same stratosphere as the best teams in the world. And that's fine. Like, the value is in supporting your local team and being involved in your local soccer community.
Yeah.
But you're probably not going to beat PSG in the Club World Cup. So,
well, I'll just say I would happily take that collection of results, because if the Sounders can get a win in this, I think that would be a huge feather in their cap. Frankly, if they can get a point from the group stage, I think that's a pretty notable accomplishment. If they can be even remotely competitive with Atletico and PSG, I think that has to be considered an accomplishment. I'll just say I think you're more optimistic than I am for the results, but I am hopeful. I would absolutely love it. I don't want to diminish the possibility of that either. So I'm going to leave it at that and let your predictions stand for the both of us.
Great.
And that's it. That's all our questions.
I'll take it. Botafogo, 9th place in Serie A.
Yeah, they are. I was just looking at their roster, and it's not exact. I mean, it's a fine roster, but it's definitely a team that the Sounders should feel like they can be competitive against. I mean, most of the guys on this roster are either good to very good MLS players, but not necessarily players who you would think are going to be just torching the league or anything.
Yeah. Get Jefferson Savarino on the team.
Right. Who plays a fair amount for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Good player. Good player.
He is a good player, but not like, do they have any national team players on their team? Brazilian national team players?
Think so, at least not for the the A team necessarily. Right. Wikipedia's links are going to places I'm not expecting, because I was going to try to answer that question.
Yeah. I mean, like, Igor Jesus has, he's got some national team. He's got 4 national team caps in the current qualifying cycle. So it's like they've got some guys that are fringy part of the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Alex Telles obviously was a pretty big star for a while there. But then they've also got Gregor.
Right. Gregory.
Is that how you say it? Gregory?
I think it's Gregory, yeah. The former
guy that we passed on signing to sign
João Paulo. And João Paulo, you figure, is going to be very motivated against Botafogo, so maybe he'll get a start in that one.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, they could also come in here and wax us 3-0. I'm not.
Yeah, right. Of course,
I'm not. But I think that they've been built up to be better than they actually are, more intimidating than they actually are.
Yeah. I mean, they won Copa America, which is great.
They did. Yeah.
Copa Libertadores, but they are not the same team.
No, they lost like a lot of players, I think, from that team, right? So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good place, I think, to call this. Thank you to our sponsors, Full Pull Wines, Hacks and Ferments, of course, our readers who are continuing to support this project that we are going through right now, and it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully people are enjoying all the content. Hope to see some of you out on the Discord. If you are new to there, please reach out, say hi. We're also of course everywhere else. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but thank you to everyone for listening and supporting. I am Jeremiah O'Shan, signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is No Study at This, and remember, you'll never eat out alone.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.